we stand up for setting up for a global security infrastructure in the modern conditions that would rest on the modern tendencies of multipolar nature, emergence of new centers of gravity that would guarantee the necessary conditions for peaceful development for all the countries. And let me remind you that we have the foundation for that. So that's the United Nations Charter. But it only takes everyone to comply with that. An important step on that way to set up the global security architecture is about building the equitable and indivisible security architecture in Eurasia, the vastest one, and its stability certainly would determine the sustainability of the whole world. At the same time, we don't have a regional organization for that, unlike Africa, which has an African Union, or unlike CELAC in Latin America. So President Vladimir Putin has put forward the initiative of creating an architecture of such a security system in Eurasia, and we invite all the countries and alliances of the continent to join our efforts, including the countries from the western part of Eurasia. In our opinion, it has to be a Eurasian architecture, because Euro-Atlantic concepts that were tried for the European part of the continent over the last decades after the end of the World War II and during the Cold War, those Euro-Atlantic concepts discredited themselves. The NATO would violate all possible commitments. The OSCE turned out to be absolutely dysfunctional as far as the Western countries. And the Secretariat of the OSCE abandoned the commitments enshrined in the founding documents, including the consensus principle and the unbiased nature of decision-making. And a couple of years ago, an agreement was signed with NATO, and this way, actually, it joined the Euro-Atlantic schemes. Russia proceeds from the fact that in Eurasia, we see the nascence of what President Putin called the Greater Eurasian Partnership, and it certainly facilitates the integratory processes that are taking place within the Eurasian Economic Union, ASEAN, in the framework of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And it is associated with other sub-regional structures that exist in the Gulf region and in South Asian Peninsula. There are lots of sub-regional organizations there, and certainly harmonizing and streamlining of those integration processes will help us to build a solid foundation for providing the security architecture. Russia is not imposing anything on anyone. We're ready for a mutual respectful dialogue with everyone. And certainly we'll improve the existing security mechanisms, and we'll use that in our work. For instance, within the CSTO, the CIS, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we are promoting within our bilateral ties with the partners and allies new principles that would contribute to setting up the Eurasian security architecture. Let me mention the recently signed treaties on the security guarantee initiative between Russia and Belarus, Russia and DPRK, and Russia and Iran on comprehensive strategic partnership. And certainly, I'd like to highlight especially that all these steps and all these initiatives echo the global security initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi, including the most important provision that the key to resolution of any conflicts anywhere in the world is identifying and eliminating the root causes of such conflicts. Next step would be about preparing the Eurasian Charter of Diversity and Multipolarity in the 21st century. The document was proposed by Belarus, and we support it. It is seeking to set up the political and legal foundations of interaction between states in the sphere of security in the Eurasian space and the parameters of cooperation between countries in a multipolar world, proceeding from the United Nations Charter in its entirety. Colleagues, Russia certainly seeks to make its own contribution to resolving the problems common for the whole mankind. And certainly, over the last years, Russia played a pivotal role in promoting our work in the area of ICT. As the very first step, we last December made sure that the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Convention Against Cybercrime, the very first universal treaty in the field of cybercrime. It was Russia's initiative, and we call on all the countries to join that document. And this autumn, this document would be signed in the capital of Vietnam. We're convinced that the United Nations still can build up its efforts on agreeing the universal principles and criteria in other areas as well, including artificial intelligence and where it might be used. And you know that certainly there are heated discussions around that. We do believe that this topic has to be considered by the global group of experts who, and also let me mention a few words about the problem of terrorism that was mentioned in the movie and in the address by the President Putin. Certainly, we are interested in strengthening the cooperation with everyone who is not making difference between good and bad terrorists and who is not using double standards. Let me draw your attention to the terrorism done by Kiev regime, and you know that they are behind the killings of Russian journalists, politicians, public figures. This is the regime that openly states its plans to continue massive shelling of the civilian facilities and killing the civilian population of the Russian Federation. This is deplorable that in the West they react only to our fear and just reciprocal acts against actually the Kiev acts of terror. And let me note that Kiev is shelling the civilian facilities and the civilians, whereas Russia reciprocates by striking the military facilities only. We'll make sure that everyone understands the very essence of what is going on, and that in another attempt to make excuses for the Kiev regime and its involvement in the acts of terror, and that these attempts are disclosed. And certainly, we will certainly support peace, strategic stability, and we will contribute to the resolution of conflicts, and we will promote the reconciliating agenda. I wish every success and fruitful work to your meeting, and every success in your responsible work. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Lavrov, and so that I'm passing the floor to Sergei Naryshkin, Director of the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. Your Excellency, Mr. Shoigu, Mr. Lavrov, Mr. Shiglov, and ladies and gentlemen, in front of our eyes, the world is undergoing a deep geopolitical transformation. Step by step, a multipolar world is coming into the shape. New centers of gravity are rising that represent the interests of the global majority. More and more countries and peoples are making the choice in favor of really free and sovereign development, thus denying liberal dogmas and relying on the traditional values. This year, we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of the World War II. The decisive defeat of Nazi Germany and militarist Japan symbolized the defeat of Nazi ideology, the demise of and the failure of its leaders to enslave the people, to deprive them of their identity and destroy them end of day. The collective security architecture that emanated by the end of the war guaranteed for the respect for sovereignty, non-interference into other countries' affairs, the right of countries and nations to independently choose their own way of political, public and economic development. Unfortunately, the lessons of history were not learned by everyone. Today's hegemonic attempts by the West to change in their favor the balance of forces again threaten the global and regional security. The rehabilitation of Nazism and Nazi collaborationism has become a precursor of what the Kiev regime did in order to exterminate the Russian-speaking population in the southeast part of Ukraine, and it triggered the protruded Ukrainian crisis. What is the root cause of that strategy? The deadly one. In my opinion, the matter is the colonial thinking which is habitual for the West, the habit to divide the mankind into two in equal parts, privileged minority and the oppressed majority.
The former believe they are denizens of the so-called blossoming garden. The others are supposed to play the role of the nutrients of this so-called garden, which actually is a hotbed of racism and violence. In retrospect, the history of international relations shows that the source of all of the major military conflicts of the past 300 years was a very narrow group of pretty much the same Western European states. Starting from the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763, which for the first time in history was fought on five continents at the same time, and ending with World War II. We're observing the same trends. A predatory instinct of Western metropolis turn into conflicts which wreak havoc and claim human lives, both in Europe and thousands of kilometers away from it. The criminal Hitler doctrine of Lebensraum, of freeing up living space, was denounced at the Nuremberg trials, but that was a continuation of that colonial policy and logic. The only difference was that it was very provocative, very blunt, and reached the apogee of hatred. Therefore, the fall of Germany and militarist Japan and the dismantling of the system of colonialism were so closely intertwined. Fighting neo-colonial developments is pretty much still a priority of Russia's foreign policy. A major component of this struggle is strengthening multilateral integration formats where cooperation is based on the principles of equality, mutual respect and non-interference in each other's affairs. In Eurasia, what we de facto have is a wide alliance including Russia, its partners and allies in the CIS, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the emerging Greater Eurasian Partnership. There's a lot of potential in terms of giving birth to a just and democratic architecture of international relations lies within BRICS, especially given its current expanded format. Western mass media love calling BRICS the alternative to the Group of Seven. However, unlike the G7, BRICS is a union of equal states which are looking for answers to the emerging challenges together. The aforementioned international formats, such as the African Union or the CELAC in Latin America, are the foundation of a multipolar world which is coming to replace deliberately this unipolar globalization. The West could play an important role in the emerging world order if it stopped in its racist attempts to force its own rules of the game on others. There are some early signs of awakening among Western elites to this new geopolitical reality, but these signs remain few and far between. In particular, we see the pushback from the so-called deep state that was caused by President Trump's plans to roll back the global propaganda of transhumanism and liberal democracy in order to focus on really pressing concerns of American politics and economy. Similarly fierce is the pushback against Mr. Trump's desire to end the conflicts in Ukraine and in the Middle East. There's a lot of infighting in the United States, which is extremely fierce, exemplified by numerous assassination attempts on Mr. Trump. In Europe, this resistance against the wind of multipolarity is even more evident because the ruling elites in Europe are used to living under American protectorate and protection and seem to be incapable of strategic thinking anymore. The leadership of the EU and the leading European powers unfortunately continues to act in the neo-colonial logic of inertia. Case in point here is the crisis in Ukraine. Europe seems set in its tracks to use Ukraine as a ram against Russia while also rearming itself. European citizens are being told that there's a need for weaponization and they're being intimidated by the so-called threat from the East. A similar logic was used by Hitler, by the way, in the run-up to World War II. The danger of this course to the whole continent is fully appreciated by clear-thinking, reasonable politicians in Europe whose voices are becoming louder, but they are facing increasing repression from the so-called liberal, but in essence totalitarian democracy. This is exemplified in part by the crisis around presidential elections in Romania, by persecutions of political opponents in France, and persecutions of the Alternative for Germany in Germany. Dear colleagues, today, as the very foundations of the global order are being shaken and the pillars of security are trembling, Russia, together with its friends and allies, once again is assuming the burden of leadership and is playing an active role in finding and looking for solutions to global crises. Let me add one thing. Historically, our country has always advocated for a just world order. That was the case when the Vienna system of international relations was created in the first quarter of the 19th century, after the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And that was also the case during the bipolar moment established after World War II. Both those systems, the Vienna system and the Yalta-Potsdam system, were characterized by stability, resilience, and reliability. They ensured lengthy periods of stability and calm for humanity. On the contrary, the Versailles world order created after World War I, which excluded the participation of Russia, as well as the bipolar world which emerged after the breakup of the Soviet Union, turned out to be unjust, fragile, and untenable. The obvious conclusion is as follows. Russia has no right to be weak. Russia can't afford it. Russia can't afford rolling back its own, giving up on its own values, chasing the chimeras of globalism and liberal totalitarianism. History tells us that Russia's firm footing is necessary for security in Eurasia and in the whole world, ultimately. This resilience and strength requires a good, equitable relations with Russia's neighbors in Eurasia and like-minded groups around the world. I am confident that we can work together to find solutions to the most complex global issues. And the meeting that we are hosting today with your participation, colleagues, is a great contribution. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Naryshkin. And now I'd like to give the floor to guest of honor, the President of the Republic Srpska, Milorad Dodik. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Shoigu, the profound transformations currently unfolding in the international order stem primarily from a new redistribution of power within the global system of states. The anarchic nature of international relations, particularly during recent decades of unipolar dominance under liberal globalism, has rendered international law effectively obsolete, while the concept of collective security, as advocated through the United Nations organizations, has been entirely sidelined. In place of the fundamental principles of international law known since the Peace of Westphalia and reaffirmed in the Charter of the United Nations, a new set of rules has emerged, dictated by the coercive authority of the collective West. These principles such as respect for sovereignty, the right to self-determination, non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, and other pillars of public international law have all but disappeared from public discourse. Political theory and practice both affirm that the foremost national interest of any state is its own security, which ensures its survival within the contemporary international system. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, security has increasingly become a privilege reserved for the wealthy North, that is, for the Western civilization. Within this hegemonic framework, the architecture of security has been constructed as a prerogative exclusive to privileged Western states and their allies, while the model of shared or collective security has been rejected for the rest of the international community. Under Pax Americana, the hegemon unilaterally determined the security of other states and international actors. strictly in line with its own interests. The principle of an equal and indivisible system of international security could not function under such conditions, as equality is not possible within a liberal globalist international order. Today it is evident that the collective West no longer possesses the internal strength to impose its political, economic and cultural models upon the rest of the world. This is particularly true for the European West, which is no longer geopolitically equipped to keep pace with emerging civilizational states, now asserting themselves as key actors in the new global geostrategic contest among major powers. What is already visible on the horizon of global political change is the establishment of a new balance of power in the international order. The balance of power is a well-known concept throughout the history of international politics. What is new in today's emerging multipolar system is its global nature. For the first time in modern history, the collective West represents only one of several centers of power. Previous balances of power, which we know from history, aside from the Cold War era, were largely confined to the European branch of Western civilization. As previously noted, today's principal drivers of change in international security are civilizational states. However, large powers, civilizational states today are building a new system. Civilizational states such as Russia, India, China, Brazil, and South Africa are, through BRICS, beginning and Saudi Arabia are beginning to balance the political, economic, and military power of the collective West. On these foundations, a new architecture of international security is being constructed. One that supports a reformed system of international relations based on the rule of law and respect for the security interests of all states, regardless of their size or wealth. The leading force in challenging the hegemonic concept of international security today is the Russian Federation, which, by launching the special military operation in Ukraine, halted not only the expansion of NATO towards the heart of Eurasia, but also allowed for a free world, whom we call the Global South today. The attitude of the collective West toward the Global South and East is well described within the framework of world systems theory. It was experienced by the Serbian people from the beginning of the disintegration of Yugoslavia to the present day. The Western concept of international security is perhaps best illustrated through the cases of Republika Srpska. And the southern Serbian province of Kosovo and Metohija, both of which remain under constant assault and blatant violation of international law. The launch of the special military operation marks the beginning of a new epoch of resistance to the hegemony of the liberal globalist West. Today, the Russian concept of a multipolar world is prevailing, one in which equal opportunities are extended not only to the privileged states of the global North, but also to the countries of the global South and East. The global East is no longer the world's periphery, and is becoming the epicenter of the 21st century. Nowhere is the West's hypocritical geopolitics more apparent than in the Balkans, where the European Union and the United Kingdom treat this part of the continent as the Middle East of Europe. Republika Srpska lies within the geographical semi-periphery of the European Union, referred to in neo-imperial discourse as the Western Balkans. After the end of the war in 1995, Bosnia and Herzegovina has been treated as a Western protectorate in the spirit of neo-colonialism so frequently imposed on the global South. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, neoliberals are conducting a historical, political, economic and cultural experiment that threatens to erase the Serbian people as a historical and political nation. Even at its homeland of Serbia, the Serbian nation is treated by the collective West as a disruptive factor in European security due to its non-alignment with Euro-Atlantic integration projects, namely the EU and NATO. On the other hand, Republika Srpska and Serbia stand as the only entities in all of Europe that have refused to impose sanctions on the Russian Federation following the start of the special military operation. And it is for this reason that the political leadership of Republika Srpska is now being politically persecuted. This persecution is carried out by an illegitimate High Representative who has not been appointed by the United Nations Security Council in cooperation with unconstitutional domestic judicial institutions. He was forced on us deliberately. This illegitimate High Representative represents yet another dark chapter in German history in the Balkans. We are now being subjected to all kinds of fines, and the so-called High Representative represents a dark chapter in German history in the Balkans. Thanks to the Russian Federation and all Christian Orthodox members of the Security Council who were against appointing this dubious personality to the Security Council. It is the collective West tested its model of hegemonic security on Serbian lands by deploying the strategy of so-called humanitarian interventionism. Under this pretext, military aggression was carried out against Republika Srpska and Serbia. That NATO operation was not based on any decisions made by the Security Council of the UN. We survived 2 waves of bombings. When we were bombed, depleted uranium was used, and now children born on our lands are struggling with severe health issues. Furthermore, we're dealing with many conditions that are very hard to treat. The Western cynicism manifests itself in the name for that operation, which was called Merciful Angel. That angel dropped depleted uranium bombs on us. The Atlantist approach to global security is now receding into history, along with the ideological divisions of the world into East and West, or into a wealthy North and an impoverished South. The countries of the Global South now represent the most dynamic regions in the world, politically, economically, and demographically, such that their security can no longer be dictated by external actors who do not share their challenges. Furthermore, the division between the wealthy and the impoverished, by the dichotomy of the global North and South, epitomizes a Western vision of globalization that is itself becoming obsolete. Without equal and indivisible international security, there can be no respect for international law. And without international law, the world moves towards global chaos. Without global security that applies equally to all states, there can be no development of freedom and democracy, no peace or prosperity in the world. It is for these reasons that Republika Srpska strongly supports the efforts and initiatives of the leadership of the Russian Federation aimed at establishing a new architecture of global security, one based on consensus among all members of the international community, free of double standards. We believe that President Putin, back in 2007, during the Munich Security Conference, said it very clearly, voiced very clearly the vision of the Russian Federation, but nobody wanted to listen to Mr. Putin back then. Everyone continued business as usual, which is why the special military operation was launched. President Putin saw the danger of the collective West, and he gave an early warning. As for the special military operation, Russia is protecting not only itself, it's also protecting the principles of international law and international relations. Russia is fighting against a system that is being forced on us in international relations, and we believe that the special military operation is completely justified. We think that President Trump's electoral victory in the US will also contribute to a more balanced world order. We're seeing that not only in the US, but in some European countries as well, there are more and more attempts to militarize their policy. But we also see a lot of goodwill, and we support and treasure China's policy, where China maintains a policy of non-intervention in other countries' affairs. We believe that this is a foundation for our relations. We know from experience that there are countries, Western countries, that do not are not responsible for the treaties they sign, like the Dayton agreements or Resolution 2024 on Kosovo and Metohija, but that is not being executed at all.
The same is true for the Minsk Accords. Ms. Merkel once said that it was signed just in order to make sure that the Western countries could strengthen their position regarding Russia. So the new militarization that has been discussed in the European countries and weaponizing of the European countries, first of all, Germany, shows to us the unsafe and insecure future. And we remember that Germany was waging two wars against us, and we hope that the message of our meeting would be heard by the whole world. And this message is about security. Security in the whole world, that the chaos does not reign. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much. And so that I'm passing the floor to the member of the Political Bureau from the Central Committee of Chinese Communist Party, Mr. Chen Wanxing. Over to you.
Your Excellency, Secretary of the Security Council Shoigu, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's a great pleasure to attend the 13th International Meeting of High Representatives for Security Issues. I want to extend my gratitude to Secretary Shoigu for the warm invitation to host country Russia for your thoughtful arrangements. The meeting this year is themed Building an Equal and Indivisible Security Architecture, Challenges and Opportunities Faced by the Global South and Eastern Countries. With the century-defining transformation accelerating across the globe, it is even more relevant to explore this topic. Today, the global challenges are unfolding like never before. We are in an era of hope. The historical trend of peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefit is unstoppable. The Global South has accounted for over 40% of global GDP and contributed as high as 80% of the world's GDP, is a key force for maintaining world peace and driving world development. We are also in an era of challenge. Global governance is seriously inadequate. Acts of trickery or extortion cause severe harm. The world has witnessed hardship in economic recovery, intensifying protectionism, and grave challenges in free trade. Traditional and non-traditional security issues are interwoven. The threat of terrorism is on the rise, cybercrime comes with more variance, and the abuse of new technologies endangers new security risks. On major issues concerning all countries' fundamental interests and the future of humanity, the international community must make the right choice, speak with one voice, and take common actions. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, 3 years ago, focusing on building a community with a shared future for mankind, President Xi Jinping has solemnly put forward the Global Security Initiative, which has been supported by over 120 countries and international organizations and written into over 120 bilateral and multilateral documents. China is ready to work with all other sides to practice the GSI and jointly build a world of universal security. First, adhering to multilateralism and opposing unilateral bullying. To address complicated issues in the world, the vision of multilateralism with coordination and cooperation at its cornerstone is the best solution. The world affairs shall be handled through extensive consultation rather than one country. On global trade, the U.S. only takes up 30% in global trade. There are still 87% left. The foreign trade of China and EU combined constitutes 30% of global trade. China remains committed to the true multilateralism, opposes any form of unilateralism, resolutely opposes the UN-centered international system and multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core, and advocates the global governance system featuring extensive consultation and joint contribution for shared benefit. Second, upholding fairness and justice and opposing might makes right. Fairness and justice are what humanity pursues and the right way for countries to get along with each other. Should everyone stress my country first and obsess over a position of strength, the law of jungle will reign the world again. At the Paris Peace Conference over 100 years ago, the Chinese asked a question resonating across the ages. Does right prevail over might, or does might makes right? China stands firm on the side of international justice, calls for fostering a new type of international relations featuring by mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation, maintains all countries are equal regardless of size, strength, or wealth, resolutely opposes power politics and hegemonism, and firmly opposes that might makes right, or the strong bullying the weak. Third, upholding the authority of international law and opposes double standards and selective application. 8 decades ago, the UN emerged as an important result of the victory of the World Anti-Fascist War. The purposes and principles of the UN Charter provide fundamental guidance for handling international relations. We should firmly safeguard the international system with the UN at its core and the basic norms of international relations based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. Major countries must take the lead in honoring their words and upholding rule of law, and must not take a selective approach in observing international law. China has joined over 600 international conventions. We are firm in safeguarding the authority of international law, opposing any violation to it, opposing unilateral sanction that violates principles of sovereign equality of states, foreign state immunity, and non-interference of internal affairs, and opposes certain country in abusing long-arm jurisdiction. Fourth, jointly tackling security issues and opposing putting one's own security above that of others. In today's world, where countries are dependent on each other, all countries face shared risks and challenges. Absolute security and exclusive security are just not viable. China calls on enhancing global security. We have actively joined nearly 30 international conventions containing enforcement and judicial cooperation and concluded over 170 bilateral treaties on extradition or legal assistance. We are ready to work with other side to enhance political mutual trust and strategic coordination, boosting cooperation, law enforcement, and security. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, China stands firm on the right side of history and strives to inject certainty to the uncertain world. China is a robust engine driving global development. Since 2020, China's GDP has exceeded 100 trillion, 110 trillion, 120 and 130 trillion RMB in succession and reached 134.9 trillion yuan in 2024, up by 5%, contributing 30% to the world economic growth. Our opening up is an open development, and we are ready to share with other countries its development outcomes. We are also a constructive force for global security and stability. We have one of the lowest rates of criminal offenses, fewest gun crimes, and lowest incidence of homicide cases globally. Last year, the criminal offense incidence per 100,000 people is 237. We are ready to communicate with other countries to enhance our capacity to coordinate development and security. We are always a reliable friend with all other countries. We always view an advanced relationship with other countries from a strategic and long-term perspective and will not be swayed by any turn of event. China is always a responsible and reliable friend. Ladies, gentlemen, friends, with a shared future, all countries should uphold solidarity. China is ready to join hands with the rest of the world to implement the global security initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping and jointly deal with risks and challenges and contribute to the world peace and development with other countries. Welcome to China to travel and visit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Simbanzin. Instead, I pass the floor to Secretary General of the Supreme Council of the National Security, United Arab Emirates, Mr. Ali Al-Shamsi. Over to you. In the name of Allah, merciful and benevolent, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, I'd like to thank His Excellency Sergei Shoigu, Secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. Also, I thank the Russian Security Council for the kind invitation to take part in that meeting that gives us an opportunity to exchange our views regarding the development of the modern world and countering different challenges that the world is facing. Also, I was glad to listen to their Excellencies Mr. Naryshkin and Mr. Lavrov. I'd like to appreciate the efforts of our friends from the Russian Federation on strengthening the international security and to stress the importance of coordinating our positions, especially in what concerns the rapid changes that we see in the development of the world order. These changes that are taking place have a special significance for us. We are strengthening We are building up our efforts to strengthen the international security. We believe that every country bears its own responsibility for our common cause. Those crises that go on one by one, that actually go from one country to another country, and to climate change and other challenges that embrace the world, require our joint efforts for resolution, and certainly cannot be solved by one country alone. Unfortunately, there is inequality in terms of distribution of the economic potential, technical systems, and under this, in such conditions, the international tension escalates. The international organized crime is rising. We see the rise of ICT crimes, cyber crimes. Certainly, the development of the modern ICT is underlying the progress, but at the same time, ICT poses new threats. We in the United Arab Emirates are very much interested in setting up an efficient security system. Also, we believe it is important to build up the international cooperation. Such changes have to have a man in the very middle, because that's the man which is our main goal. That's why we are developing education, we're developing culture, in order to bring up that new man. And this is what we are calling on everyone, nationally and in our bilateral relations with our brothers across the world, because this is our common cause to build a better future. Now that the crises are mushrooming, when the problems and challenges in the international ICT become graver, a special role is played by the data exchange with our partners. This improves our immunity to the cyber threats that we are facing, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the fork in the road, historical, that requires pulling our efforts together and pursuing a flexible policy that will help us to address the challenges of the modern times. We have to offer equal opportunities for economic development, especially once we speak about the relations between the countries that should rest on equal rights of everyone. This is our common cause. I want to wish our meeting every success in all its efforts, especially in terms of strengthening the international cooperation. We stand up for friendship and cooperation between all the countries. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Shamsian. Saying that, I'm passing the floor to State Secretary of the Security Council of Belarus, Alexander Wolfovich. Over to you. Dear participants in that meeting, let me cordially welcome everyone present in the room on behalf of the Republic of Belarus. I share the assessments of the current geopolitical situation that have already been voiced. For my part, I would like to briefly dwell on the approaches of the Belarusian side to the issues of resolving contemporary challenges and threats and ensuring regional and global security. Dear colleagues, we have to state that the situation in the world remains tense and difficult to predict. The risks of escalation remain high. We are witnessing a profound transformation of the entire system of the international relations and the irreversible process of forming a new multipolar world order. In the context of the degradation of the system of international securities, confidence-building measures and arms control, forms and methods of waging wars and military conflicts are being unrestrainedly improved. New types of weapons are being actively developed, and their physical application is expanding. Artificial intelligence technologies are being used intensively and uncontrollably, which exacerbates the complex situation in terms of the international legal regulation.
A major global shock and rise of tension is caused by unprecedented growth of protectionism and trade wars in the world. The information sphere and cyberspace have long ago become a virtual arena of global confrontation. Other threats, such as international terrorism and extremism, illegal migration, illegal trade in weapons, people and drugs, are rapidly transforming. Unfortunately, the international organizations set up to ensure global and regional security remain unbalanced, and they are unable to respond in a timely manner to current challenges and threats. They are unable to ensure strategic stability as a whole. The world's largest conflicts in the Middle East and Eastern Europe continue unabated, and the escalation could lead to irreparable consequences on a global scale. There is concern about the growing risks of states engaging in direct confrontation, states possessing nuclear weapons. Despite the negative factors outlined earlier, the process of finding ways to defuse international tension and reduce strategic risks should be regarded as a positive trend. Belarus welcomes the measures undertaken to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. However, the risks of new provocative action and the expansion of military conflicts remain. In the Eastern European region, this is directly indicated by the unrestrained growth of militaristic sentiments and the aggravation of the situation in our region. 2 or 3 years ago, the peak of absurdity for us was the construction by Poland and the Baltic states of all sorts of fencing structures along the borders with Belarus and Russia. And by the way, the West had been fighting against this for decades. In the worst traditions of the Cold War, Warsaw, Vilnius and Riga have literally fenced themselves off from us and have completely destroyed all forms of civilized communication. This year, our Western neighbors went even further. They decided to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines. Under the pretext of strengthening NATO's eastern flank, they are working on plans to install mine barriers along the borders of Belarus and Russia. Obviously, despite all the attempts and the process of resolving the Ukrainian crisis, this indicates that the EU is unwilling to return the situation to the political and diplomatic track. The promotion of some European capitals of the thesis of an inevitable war with Moscow is particularly alarming. Under this pretext, the EU defense strategy is focused exclusively on increasing its combat capabilities and strengthening its eastern flank. Thus, it confirms its focus on the long-term preservation of its aggressive policy in the eastern direction. This is confirmed by specific figures. During this year alone, over 400 exercises involving about 500,000 of servicemen are conducted on the territory of European countries. The activities and the nature of the tasks to be addressed and testify to the fact that the West is actively, openly preparing for military action against Russia and Belarus. All this convinces us once again on the need to relaunch a global dialogue on the formation of a new security architecture at the regional and international levels, an architecture that will be based on the principles of indivisibility, multipolarity, mutual respect, equality of sovereign states, and the rule of international law. One of the important elements in ensuring this process, among other things, is the Belarusian initiative launched in 2023 to develop a charter of diversity and multipolarity in the 21st century. The main provisions of the charter fully emphasize the relevance of today's agenda. In February this year, the draft charter was presented in Geneva to a number of international organizations, including the United Nations, the SCO, BRICS, European Union, ASEAN, and the CIS. Further discussion of this draft document will continue during the traditional Minsk high-level international conference on Eurasian security. This year, at the suggestion of the President of the Republic of Belarus, the event will be held in the Eurasia Plus format. We take this opportunity and we call upon our colleagues to pay attention to this document and to join the process of developing the Charter. Distinguished colleagues, we have recently celebrated a date of great importance for many countries, the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War, the victory over Nazism and fascism. Today, this date is a special occasion to once again reflect on the causes of that war, its lessons, to refresh our memories of the decisions of the Nuremberg trial, so that the tragedy should never happen again. We are convinced that today there is still a unique window of opportunity to prevent confrontation, which the Westerners are actively pushing us towards. This should be done in the name of dialogue and the promotion of a peaceful agenda on the international arena and in the European region in particular. We sincerely hope that the consolidated efforts that we undertake will serve to develop a new political process to build confidence, security and cooperation, similar to Helsinki, but in line with the realities of the present day. Distinguished colleagues, dear Mr. Shoigu, in conclusion, allow me to thank our Russian friends for their warm welcome and excellent working conditions. In the current challenging international environment, we highly appreciate this opportunity to exchange views on topical issues and measures that our countries can take to promote global and regional security. I'm confident that the common approaches, bold ideas and opinions identified by the participants of this meeting will shape the basis for specific constructive steps. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to invite the Minister of State Security of DPRK, Ri Chang-dae. В первую очередь, позвольте мне выразить глубокую
힘을 다하고 우리 대표단을 친철히 초청해준 서희부 서기장 동지를 비롯한 조직위원회 성원들에게 깊은 사의를 표합니다. 아울러 이번 연단에 참가한 세계 여러 나라의 대표들과 법들에게 따뜻한 인사를 보냅니다. 존경하는 서기장 동지, 오늘 우리는 침략과 전쟁, 간섭이 없는 평화롭고 안정된 환경 속에서 전 인류의 내면이 그 어느 때보다도 고조되고 있는 속에 이 자리를 함께 하였습니다. 조선민주주의인민공화국 대표단은 러시아聯邦안전이사회가 주최한 이번 국제상봉이 자주와 정의, 평화를 지향하는 모든 나라들 사이 단결과 협력을 도모하고 평등과 호혜의 원칙에 기초한 공정하고 안정적인 다국 세계 창설을 추동해 나가는 데서 중요한 정치적 우위를 가진다고 평가합니다. 지금 국제 무대에서는 특정한 세력이 독단과 전횡으로 말미암아 정의가 부정으로 범죄시되고 형편한 지배와 간섭에 의한 완전한 평등과 호상 존중, 내정 불간섭 및 협조의 원칙 등 세계적으로 공인된 국제관계의 기본 원칙들이 공공연하게 무시되고 있으며 그로 인하여 세계의 안전 환경은 엄중히 파괴되고 이 행성의 곳곳마다에서는 대립과 충돌이 악순환이 계속되고 있습니다. 세계의 그 어느 나라도 인류 공동의 이익과 국제법 위에 미국의 이익을 올려놓고 다른 나라들은 이에 복종할 것을 강요하는 지배주의적이며 제국주의적인 지정학적 구도를 바라지 않고 있습니다. 국제사회의 내면과 배치되게 패권과 사례를 추구하면서 다른 나라들을 제멋대로 평가하고 진영 대결을 강요하는 미국의 일방주의적이며 군사 패권주의적인 정책은 국제평화와 안전이 근간을 허무고 있는 항시적인 요인으로 되고 있습니다. 조선반도 정세가 주기적인 긴장 격화의 악순환 고리에서 벗어나지 못하고 있는 원인도 미국과 그의 추종하는 반평화 세력들이 배타적인 동맹추구 정책에 기인됩니다. 최근 년간 오커스와 코드와 같은 군사불력 형성으로 아시아 태평양 지역에 새로운 신냉전 체제를 구축한 미국은 미일한 삼각 군사 공조를 제도화하고 이를 조선민주주의인민공화국과 러시아聯邦을 비롯한 지역의 자주적인 주권 국가들을 억제 포위하기 위한 지정학적 수단으로 삼고 있습니다. 특히 유라시아 대륙의 불안전한 안보 위기를 몰아한 주변인 나토가 미국이 부추긴 밑에 아시아 태평양 지역의 자기의 하부 구조를 이식하고 전쟁 준비 수준을 제고하기 위한 군사적 움직임을 번개가 있는 것으로 하여 지역의 불안정 지수는 날이 갈수록 격상되고 있습니다. 최근에 미국이 조선반도 지역의 핵 잠수함과 전략 폭격기, 항공모함을 비롯한 전략 자산들을 공개적으로 투입하는 노름에서 역대 기록을 갱신하고 있다는 사실만으로도 우리에 대한 체질적인 거부감과 적대의식에 쩌든 미국의 군사적 대결 자세를 잘 알 수 있습니다. 아시아 태평양 지역에서 벌어지고 있는 이러한 미국의 진영 대결, 편가르기 책동은 불핍고 재앙적 국가를 초래하는 것으로서 절대로 용납하지 말아야 합니다. 미국과 그 주종국가들이 패권 정책, 대결 정책에 대한 조선민주주의인민공화국 입장은 명백하며 우리는 국가의 자주권과 존엄, 인민의 안녕을 위협하는 그 어떤 적대적 행위에 대해서도 추하도 묵과하지 않고 정의로운 투쟁과 강력한 힘으로 대응해 나갈 것입니다. 이러한 견지에서 조선민주주의인민공화국은 나라의 주권적 권리와 안전이익을 수호하기 위한 성업 수행에 총매진하고 있는 러시아 군대와 인민에게 전적인 지지와 성원을 보냅니다. 존경하는 서 기장 동지, 친애하는 대표 여러분, 지난 4월 말 조로 두 나라 군인들이 어깨에 꽂고 한전호에서 피를 흘리면서 러시아의 신성한 영토인 쿠르스크 지역을 우크라이나 신나치스 강점주의자들로부터 완전히 해방한 것은 불의에 대한 정의의 승리인 동시에 조로 두 나라 사이의 굳건한 전투적 우위와 두 나라 인민들 사이의 동맹관계, 형제관계의 가장 높은 전략적 높이를 과시한 일대 역사적 사변으로 됩니다. 러시아聯邦 경내에서 진행된 공화국 무력의 군사활동은 유엔 헌장을 비롯한 국제법과 조로 사이의 포괄적인 전략자 동반자 관계에 의한 조약의 제반 조항과 정신에 전적으로 부합되며 그 리행의 가장 충실한 행동적 표현이 본보기적 사례의 훌륭한 기감으로 됩니다. 조로 두 나라 수뇌부들이 전략적 결단에 따라 새로운 높은 단계로 승격된 강력한 조로 동맹 관계는 제국주의자들이 강권과 전행, 군사적 위협과 간섭을 억제하기 위한 평화 수호의 강력한 보루로 전략적 지탱점으로 작용하게 될 것입니다. 조선민주주의 인민공화국은 앞으로도 자주 평화 신선의 기치 아래 정의와 자주성을 지향하는 세계의 모든 나라들과 선진우호 관계를 발전시켜 나갈 것이며 평등한 다극 세계 건설과 세계의 평화와 안전 보장을 위하여 자기의 책임적인 사명과 임무를 다해 나갈 것입니다. 끝으로 나는 회의 참가자 여러분 모두가 건강할 것과 책임적인 사업에서 성과를 거두기를 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Now it is my pleasure to invite the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Mr. Ahmadyan. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Shoigu for the organization of this important and influential international events. I want to thank the President and the government of the Russian Federation for the warm welcome afforded to us during this significant meeting. Distinguished colleagues, today the world is on the threshold of a transition from the old order, whose proponents left behind two devastating world wars. An order whose consequences have affected everybody. An order that emerged after two world wars. An order that through unilateral action in the political, military, economic and cultural spheres imposed the supremacy of one power in satellites, in hard, semi-hard and soft forms, on all countries and peoples, and imposed its oppressive and inhumane standards, values, and norms. The results of that order are obvious in Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and many other countries. This is an order, in its latest manifestations, the terrorist and brutal gang that is ruling the occupied Palestine can massacre women and children, burn them alive, or condemn them to a slow death by starvation, suppressing the slightest protests or objections, leaning on other Western countries and their satellites. This is an order that is based on the exploitation of the weak and injustice. And the core of this order is a lack of justice And the outcome is endless wars, poverty, and killings around the world. Distinguished colleagues, we are followers of a divine and monotheistic religion whose commandment is, do not oppress and do not let yourselves be oppressed. Now, this means that our religion not only forbids submissive acceptance of oppression, but also considers the act of oppression itself unacceptable and abhorrent. Now, the motto of this religion is, the state can withstand without belief, but it cannot withstand under oppression. In other words, power can be maintained on the basis of godlessness, but it cannot stand if it is built on injustice. The experience of humankind has also shown that imposing and perpetuating oppression does not bring security. On the contrary, it sows the seeds of instability. For more than 70 years, Palestine has suffered occupation, and its people have been subjected to atrocities, torture, exile, starvation, and genocide. The world system of domination has repeatedly perpetuated this situation. Today, however, the root of all instability in our region is the persistence of that very injustice. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to call you to attention at the beginning of the third millennium. I want to warn you all. An entire nation is facing the threat of mass murder, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. What happens to the world if it turns a blind eye to the global disaster? In this transitional or post-bipolar world, biased interpretations of international values and principles by certain powers, regional and global players, have gone unpunished. Destabilization of different regions of the world, deprivation of national sovereignty, committing mass crimes in full view of the whole world, denial of people's right to develop and to progress. All this is happening under the cover of different interpretations of generally accepted international norms and values. Clearly, expansion of global security depends on new world order that would offer equal opportunities to all countries, to all nations. Therefore, a new security architecture should be built with the participation of all the countries, all the peoples. Ladies and gentlemen, security, from our standpoint, is based on a rejection of oppression, maintaining identity and sovereignty of different nations and countries, and establishing equal relations with other countries, with no pressure, no sanctions, or coercion. This also includes respect of people's rights and support of the oppressed across the world. The creation of a just and equal system is impossible without contribution of all the peoples, all the countries. Iran believes that justice is the key link that is missing in the global system. On the other hand, global security is unattainable without taking into account human dignity, without spiritual growth and resistance to oppression. And at the next stage, we should think about the preservation of the family. Unfortunately, today, the security of humanity and the security of the family as the basic unit of society is subject to destruction and trampling. Security devoid of human criteria and protection of family values, in fact, is meaningless. Distinguished participants, today, various global security institutions and the world in general fell hostage to the inefficiency of the current security systems hijacked by Western powers. And the best proof of this is the inaction of these structures in the face of the many months of genocide in Gaza. These crimes are the result of exploitative treatment of other countries, deliberate creation of economic and technological inequalities, and the deprivation of peoples and states of free access to the benefits of humanity through sanctions and restrictions. A prime example is the attempt to deny the Iranian people the right to a peaceful nuclear program. The Islamic Republic of Iran, based on its ideology, rejects domination and subjugation, but always welcomes equal dialogue. We emphasize the renunciation of weapons of mass destruction. Yet Iran will not give up its legitimate rights, such as independence in the nuclear sphere, including possession of the fuel cycle and uranium enrichment. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the steps of the Islamic and progressive countries of the South and the East in a transition from a unipolar world to a multipolar one will chime in a new era in the history of the world based on peace, justice, and equal development. On this path, common interests and opportunities, as well as common threats, will be shaping the prospects of our future cooperation and will help strengthen its foundation. Strengthening of multilateralism and joint efforts to build a strong and equitable security architecture is an urgent need of the international system. Successful examples of this can already be seen. I'm referring to organizations such as the BRICS and the SCO. In the new order, full participation, inclusiveness, given an active role to those players who have not previously had the opportunity to fully engage, are indeed key solutions to ensure security in the new context. Together, I invite you to build a world where honesty, coexistence, and justice replace the language of threats, discrimination, and sanctions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Akhmedian. It is my pleasure to invite the Secretary General of the National Security Council of the Republic of Turkey, Mehmet Şoray. Over to you, sir.
Esteemed colleagues, I would like to begin my remarks by thanking the Russian Security Council and Secretary Shoigu for hosting such an important meeting. In today's world, where new trends come into the scene continuously, the erosion in global governance, the weakening of multilateral institutions, and the difficulty of coordination in global issues are the most important challenges. We are concurrently facing numerous political, military, economic, environmental, technological, and social challenges in the international system. Armed conflicts, terrorism, irregular migration, xenophobia, and Islamophobia. Unfortunately, the current international order cannot provide peace, stability, and justice. Specifically, cannot produce effective solutions to the scourges of the global community, especially to the ones the peoples of the global South and East are facing. The troublesome ineffectiveness of international institutions are frequently voiced by Turkey, especially by our President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Today, when we talk about the crisis of the international system, we are not referring to an abstract to see that many countries turn a blind eye to the atrocities in Gaza. Unfortunately, the civilian death toll has exceeded 54,000. The tragic events taking place there and the shocking indifference of some in the global community raise justified questions on a rules-based international system. Another issue facing the international community is that the increase in prosperity brought about by globalization is not distributed fairly at the global level. The most important consequences of this situation is undoubtedly food insecurity and famine. It is extremely grave that from Africa to Asia, millions of people are struggling with hunger. The only way to change this dark picture is to strengthen international cooperation and solidarity. The solution to global challenges requires collective efforts forged by cooperation and effective multilateralism. We strongly believe this is where the opportunities lie for countries like Turkey and many others of the global South and East, for building a global architecture of equal and indivisible security. By engaging in dialogue and collectively voicing our rightful demand for a fairer world order, we can create meaningful and positive change in the global governance system. With this goal in mind, Turkey actively participates in many global and regional organizations. While honoring our commitments in the context of our long-lasting alliances and acting as a stabilizing force in those institutions, we are building new ties with other organizations, especially those from the global South and East. To further enhance our ties with the countries of these regions, we have formulated the Asia and New policy alongside our Latin America and Africa partnership initiatives. The future of humanity in relation to science and technology is another issue. Turkey strongly believes that scientific and technological innovations should not be seen as a trump card to increase competitive power, and that all nations should benefit from the advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence. Likewise, as Turkey, we have always viewed the energy and transport issues as areas of cooperation rather than competition. In addition to our own needs, we have implemented many projects that support regional and global energy security, as well as transport corridors in various directions. Furthermore, Turkey is committed to assisting and supporting developing countries in their sustainable development and growth efforts. Our development aid is making a visible difference in many parts of the world, including the global South and East. Distinguished colleagues, Turkey considers security as a matter of shared responsibility, moral obligation, and global solidarity, and believes that it should be human-centered. We will continue to cooperate with like-minded countries for a fairer and more inclusive international order and more resilient security architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mimish. I give the floor to the General Secretary of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Mr. Nurbayev. Mr. Shoigu, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak here at this international event. The building of an equitable and indivisible security structure is of particular importance to a transnational organization such as our SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Our priority is support of peace, stability, and security. We're not a military political bloc united by the principle of military support. We're non-confrontational and not aimed against third countries. A specific area of our work is countering terrorism, extremism, and extremism done by a particular structure within the organization. The 26 member countries of SCO are committed to turning our region into a prosperous and secure space. The approaches of our organization are shared by the Astana Declaration signed by the leaders of our countries and other documents of the kind. SCO there speaks in a single voice for unity and not division, cooperation, not confrontation, justice, not hegemony. It is clear security cannot be a privilege for a few. It cannot be secured at the expense of others. The Astana Declaration says SCO member countries state that interaction within the organization can help build an architecture of equitable and indivisible security in Asia. SCO member states study here the Russian-Belarusian initiative for building an architecture of security and a joint vision of the Eurasian Charter of Inclusivity in the 21st century. SCO is undergoing a process of modernization and adaptation to the realities of life. An important component of that is improving the response mechanisms that are triggered by security challenges. This means building a comprehensive system of specialized institutions, such as a comprehensive center to counter threats situated in Tashkent, which works in the sphere of information security and organized crime. In Dushanbe, another structure will be established, the Energy Center of SCO. SCO works also in the socio-economic and cultural spheres. Esteemed participants, at present, we are now preparing for an SCO summit in April next year in Tianjin, China. We are sure that this summit will propel the organization to new levels of cooperation. Acting together with our partners, we are prepared to play an even greater role in building a new, stable, democratic, equitable, and secure world with a structure of indivisible security for all. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, we will now have a lunch break that will last until 2 o'clock Moscow time. And we will continue in this same room under the chairmanship of Mr. Kokov. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.